Wonderful to meet you, sir. Thank you
You
so
too,
much for
Joe.
taking that out.
No, my pleasure.
So let's begin our journey with COVID. 5 years ago, it changed our lives, changed everything. How did you get through the COVID period, and how has it influenced or affected the way that you do things now?
Well, a lot of questions there and quite radically different answers to them all. As a publisher, my business began during the lockdown. And that was largely coincidental, but it was very much a lockdown company. Um, Business-wise, if you know anything about publishing or writing or books, a lot of that just does take place solitary and in one room. Regarding the lockdown itself, I think it changed a lot. I had two children here, both in secondary education, and to have them at home and both my wife and I working from home was tough. My wife and I had our desks in a bedroom, so not much of a commute, but it's tricky. And both the children, because of their teenagers, their ages are quite different, and no, their ages weren't different. There's actually only 16 months between these two, but their responses were different. And one really took to his bedroom and watched everything on Netflix about 3 or 4 times, which I think a lot of people did. And the other one, who was 16 months younger, we had a ball because we weren't really supposed to go out, but you know, I had to go out. No, I had to go out and get food and do all the rest of these things. And so he and I ended up cycling around the deserted city every 2 or 3 days, and it was beautiful. It was really beautiful to be with him, to be cycling. He was just at maybe the age where he was quite into his, I think it was maybe 13 or 14. He liked the idea of doing stunts and things. So we'd go to the museum and cycle down the steps and bouncing off certain monuments and things. And so we spent that was probably my highlight. The rest of it, working from here now, of course, I just described we've got two boys. They're both very heavy eaters, and having to make four full meals 3 times a day, more than that because of them. So, I'd work, you stop about 11:30 because that's when people start appearing looking hungry. And then, I'm making bacon, sausages, eggs, sandwiches till half one, two. And I grew to hate that. I grew to loathe that.
Yeah.
But I took all that on board. Um, Business-wise, I think it was good. I just exited another business and turned 50. And that's when I decided I wanted to try publishing. And that was simply because everything else that could have been done with books, writing them, selling them, distributing them, I'd really been involved in for 20, 20 years or more. And I'd taken on a lot of editorial work. I was very interested in the possibilities of publishing. So I started a publishing company, then the lockdown happened. To be honest, that gave me a lot of grace, really, because I was, everyone was sort of buried away doing their own thing. And to set up a publishing company, I mean, it can be quite easy, but you start with no books. You've got
Yeah.
to make those, and they take a long time. You've got to find the authors, work with the authors, and do all the stuff. So it gave me a bit of cover to to get the publishing company started so that when lockdown lifted, it was kind of there, ready to go. And I began, I think, which was probably a more important part of my work, which is relationships and building relationships and networking and just keeping everything together. So those were the sort of personal aspects of lockdown. We've actually got COVID in the house at the moment. There's four others here. They've all
Oh,
done positive tests. So
yeah.
it's still going on,
Uh-huh.
but there's no lockdown. And I find that very interesting. And so do my children who sort of grown up through it and were saying to me just yesterday, because want to go back to one's in the final year at school. He really wants to go back to school, saying you can't go because you've got COVID, you can't go.
Yeah.
So we're doing tests every day, and he's saying this is just like the flu now, isn't it? And why did the whole world stop? And these are very good questions that are very much in my mind. But I know this isn't a conspiracy podcast,
Right.
but there were questions that I would ask that I asked then of, our governments who were clearly from the start
Yeah.
fudging the truth to be generous. There was something going on
Yeah.
because the story kept changing, do this, and it seemed serious, it seemed extreme, and then there were so many contradictory laws, and that was not wasted on my children.
Yeah.
Really not. And they're still saying that we didn't need the lockdown, did we? And it's a
Yeah. I
a big
agree.
question to be asked as a father. But so we're still having that discussion. We were
Yeah.
talking about it yesterday. Uh, what was that? Was it necessary? What
Yeah.
happened? I haven't done a test. I'm not feeling so good, but I'm still working. But at the same time, they can't go back. One can't go to college. One can't go to school because they're testing positive. And they're actually both those two. There's another one in is 16 is still unwell, and my wife as well uh, is just recovering. But yeah, it's very different. So a very strange time,
Yeah.
and we could talk about it endlessly. I
Yeah, we
really could.
could. Yeah,
I've got a lot to say about that.
it was a very strange time. So I'm curious, when did you get this love for reading and writing as a publisher, as a writer? How did this all begin and evolve into this career you have?
I presume it's the same for many of us who like or dare I say it, love books as a child. Um, I, any parent who's kind of in my generation will have at many points encouraged their children to read books and say, go on, you read books because it's just something that doesn't really happen like the way it used to when I was a kid. But I was the one whose mum was saying, don't read books, get outside, go and do something, get that book. I can remember quite well just sitting there, um, starting about 13 or 14 and reading some so-called classic authors like Thomas Hardy and really getting into that. Although I'm not my primary first love was fantasy and science fiction, still do like it. Um, but she's saying, put down that book, get out and play and go and be normal. Um, but I kept reading, and had vague notions that I might go into something like journalism, which I did do for quite a long time, which involved writing. And uh, things really, I had a friend in my 20s who was also a great reader, and we would always go to bookshops together and read and discuss our books and things. And he said to me one time, when the barrel's full, water will start to spill over the edge, and that's your writing.
Yeah.
And I was wondering about that image, but there was a point where I did just start to write. I lived in a small town, a smaller town in Scotland, so cultural opportunities such as theatre and things were harder to come by. But I started writing plays because it, observing other people and their routes to success, it seemed to be quite a good thing to do. If you wanted to be in a play, why not write it yourself, get people together and do it? And that's really what happened from the age of 18 right through to, my early mid 20s doing community theatre and organizing plays and doing things like that. And that was fundamentally prompted by my own desire to write plays, and then that turned into fiction writing. And my first novel, I think, was published when I was but just turned 30 or so in 2000. And once you've done it once you've finished a book, gets easier. We've just had the Edinburgh International Book Festival here, and I was just speaking to someone who most people consider a very successful author who's just going on to her third book, and she confided in me and said, I think I might just be getting it and getting to like it and realize I can do it. And that really blew me away because I can remember that you it's a difficult thing to learn to do, but far from impossible.
Yeah.
And once you've completed one, I think I've always thought one of the hardest things about writing a book is completion. Anything to do with art, actually. Um, I don't know if you've ever seen this film of Picasso where he's painting on glass. The camera is looking at him. You don't see the glass, and he paints on it. And it becomes immediately apparent that his skill is finishing. Like he knows when the picture is finished.
Yeah.
And he'll just go on to the next one. And so from that, I've always understood that it, it it's a significant skill for a writer, or in fact any artist, to really develop to be able to finish,
Yeah.
close, close the project, go on to the next one. It's quite an art, and there's a lot to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So who's been your hero? Who's been your inspirational force that's allowed you to become a publisher and to evolve as a writer?
Well, I've had a lot of writer friends, and I got a great story about one of them. One of the very first inspiration. Uh, so I was in my hometown or in Aberdeen. It was the late 90s, and I'd really just started writing, thinking about that, and I used to spend a lot of time in the city library, and I picked up this book by a Californian. His name is Todd McEwen. But it's a novel set in Scotland. And I just thought it was the greatest book. I thought, this is great. This is fantastic. Loved this novel. And not only did I find his other works, but about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks after that, this guy turned up in town, turned up in Aberdeen. He was working there. So it being a small town, it was very easy for me to sidle up to him and say hello, tell him I admired his work. And that was a great experience because, when you've written something, when you want to take it to the world. And it's not a given that every person who writes something wants either to be an author or even to have it published. There are so many different trajectories and ways you can go with things, and reasons for doing it. But I wanted to be a published writer, and one of the first stages in that is, I suppose, acceptance from someone you admire, a professional in your field. It'd be probably the same in any profession. So giving him gingerly, as it was, my manuscript, which I confess was by that stage quite like his novel, it
Yeah.
has to be said in some respects. Whether or not he noticed that or not, he responded very positively. And this is one of the great things about writing and publishing is when you've written a book, you've obviously largely, if not entirely, done it yourself. Give it to someone else, they take it seriously. There are now two people on board. You've actually doubled, and it goes on like that. It goes on like that, and so those first readers are, really important, and especially if they're professionals and so forth. Um, I've really been inspired here by the industry of others just like myself, who I would describe professionally as micro publisher. Um, as a publisher, I'm a one-person operation. I work maybe 1.5, 2 days a week. I have one part-time staff. Sometimes I've had more. Over the last 5 years, I've had, depending on funding and other opportunities. Um, so there are quite a lot of publishers wherever you go who work on that basis, but in Scotland and actually across the UK, it's a really common model. There are a lot of people, individuals or partnerships like myself, uh, who do this, and the ones who've done it consistently here in Scotland for decades and decades, I really do consider an inspiration. Um, there's a publisher here in Scotland called Luath, who are not a micro publisher really, but really started as a cottage industry and published some really significant Scottish writers, over now. Oh, crikey, must be coming on for between 40 and 50 years they've been going. So I find a lot of inspiration from, colleagues and industry, professionals like myself, people already doing it, because the inspiration is they're able to do it. You don't, there wasn't a sort of particular entry requirement, which I must sort of quickly add. I'm aware at the same time there are people out there who have degrees in publishing and have studied it for for years. And for someone with no degree or any qualification in anything, just I had experience being published, to come along and say, well, I'm going to become a publisher. Um, it can be done really. I published in the 90s before my first novel was published. I Aside from writing as well as I could, there were a couple of other things that I tried to help my chances of getting publication, such as visualization techniques, which I'm sure you're aware of. And actually, writers do try it. Just imagine, close your eyes, imagine walking into a bookshop and seeing your book on the shelf. It's that simple. And if you keep doing it, but one other technique that I sort of developed then was I wanted the experience of being read. It's a thing. You're writing and no one's reading it. So to be read, I would just give it to people. And that evolved into making pamphlets. So I would always ensure that I had as an occupation, I worked in offices and things, access to a photocopier, because then I could make little booklets, because you would just print the pages, fold them.
Yep,
You need a long arm stapler. And that's what I would tell people. Say, to get into publishing, all you need is a long arm stapler. And then you've made a booklet, and I give
yep,
it to people. And for me, because again, if you're going to be a published writer, that's something that's going to happen to you and that you want to happen. People are going to read what you've written and they're going to respond to it. They're going to respond back to you. And it's going to be a surprise what they say. You're not going to be prepared for what they say. It's really good. I mean, it's devastating too from time to time, but mostly it's really informative and helps you grow and stuff. So,
yeah. So let me ask you this. Everyone out there has a perception of you. Family, friends, clients, readers, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
well, that's a philosophical question. I should have been um, I have never uh, I've always been one of these people, as I say, I left school with vague notions about journalism, but really, I'm hesitating because it's not really a professional question, because I really think my role in the family and in that larger community, I think a lot more often than I do as my professional role. What I am to others seems to be up to them. To me, I appear to really enjoy the company of writers, particularly, and in a way collect them, which is why I've gone into publishing, because that way I get to meet more writers. And I have published somewhere in the region of between 50 and 60 different writers. And with no exception, really, no exception, those have all been good and nutritive and fun relationships that have produced beautiful books. And those are things that drive me professionally. I want to produce books and I want to be with people that do. And actually, other things are a distraction um, to me, not to everyone else. So, for example, politics or other aspects. And we have a pretty small but beautifully formed publishing and writing community in Scotland. Um, the population of Scotland is in itself, it's actually less than that of, metropolitan Miami or Boston. So if you were to look at we were to look at the publishing environments that those cities could support and then transfer that to this one country, you might start to get an idea. That strangely enough, the publishing community in Scotland, although it's attached to England and is the same country, United Kingdom, the two don't really meet. There's an English community and a Scottish community, which some people are trying to, break that down, and I'm all for that. But um, I see myself as really part of that community of what we'd call like Scottish publishing or writing, and I really enjoy the work of other publishers in that community and writers. I just love it when someone's writing a book. So people send ideas to the or finished manuscripts to me as a publisher, and I'm generally fascinated by that. I have capacity only to publish at the moment maybe two or three, four books a year, but I'm still fascinated to see what people are doing. And if someone's got a friend of a friend who's written a book, I'd love to know about it. And I would see myself as someone who's very positive about writing and the creation and production of books in general.
So let me ask you this. If anybody, speaking of, wants to get your books, that you publish your actual books yourself, any of the
Mhm.
good work, where do they go?
Well, got a website, Leamington Books. Um, that's where my work as a publisher is. Uh, my work as a writer is scattered over various publishers across UK and the States, published by Skyhorse in the States, and um, a few different Scottish publishers, a couple of which I don't think are extant anymore. They do come and go quite quickly. Um, and I've in recent years been diversifying a little and publishing under different names, not to try and conceal myself, but just because publishing works in quite a formal lanes type of manner. If you're known for writing one thing, let's say it's romance, and then you decide you want to write a non-fiction historical book about the Battle of Waterloo, people will just shrug and so I've now written a few other things under various other names because I'm uh, developing more into some non-fiction titles, which I really want to write about myself. Um, but to start off with, have a look at Leamington Books website, or you can search it. We are on numerous too tedious to mention social media platforms, which I have increasingly less to do with, largely because they don't the work that people put into them doesn't necessarily translate into sales. And as I'm selling books as well as writing them, I do need to concentrate on the things that actually promote sales, which is actually more relationships than tweets.
Yeah.
So, but we're on LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, which is rarely checked, I'm afraid to say. X, Blue Sky. Um, you know that one, Blue Sky? Have you
Yeah.
seen
Blue
that
Sky.
app? Yeah.
Yep. New platform.
So yeah, I went over to try that. Actually, I quite like it because a lot of a lot of real world friends and
Yep.
publishers and writers that I like are there. So I do like it, but I went there with unwilling because the last thing I need in my day to day is another social media
Yeah.
platform. Really, I'm just trying to drop them if anything.
Yeah, I totally get it. Well, I will have a link to the website. This has
Yeah,
been
it'd be great.
absolutely, yeah, this is great, Peter. Thank you so much for opening up. Thank you for your story. I hope everybody mends well, and I send all my best. I
That's
appreciate
really
it.
good. Hey, thanks, Joe. It's been super. I really dig the podcast and love that piece of art behind you. It's a map of the states, but
Yeah,
what's going on?
map of the
What's going
states. Yeah, I'm
on?
I'm a visual artist, and I put that
Oh,
together. Yeah, my wife's a high school English teacher, so the original is in her room, and it was just kind of a. I had an extra canvas, and I'm like, let me just see what the United States would look like, and it turned out okay, I guess. So it's good.
that's okay. Yeah, none of the colors leaching into Florida, however, but
Right.
I do like it down there. So I do like it. I do like it, Florida, Miami.
They have enough color down there on their own, so we
I
had to
guess
put it
that's
all in the
true.
Midwest. Yeah. So it's good, man. Peter, this has been a pleasure. Thank you, sir. I
Super. You
appreciate
have a
it.
great day. Thanks, Joe.
You too.
Bye
Thank you,
bye.
sir.